The Hephthalites, Ephthalites, Ye-tai, White Huns, or in Sanskrit as the Sveta Huna, were a confederation of nomadic and settled people in Central Asia who expanded their domain westward in the 5th century. At the height of its power in the first half of the 6th century, the Hephthalite Empire controlled territory in present-day Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, India and China. Earlier history. The stronghold of the Hephthalites was Tokaristan on the northern slopes of the Hindu Kush, in what is present-day northeastern Afghanistan. By 479, the Hephthalites had conquered Sogdia and driven the Kidarites westwards, and by 493 they had captured parts of present-day Dzungaria and the Tarim Basin in what is now northwest China. The Hephthalites invaded India for the first time in the 5th century and were defeated by Emperor Skandagupta of the Gupta Empire. By the end of the 5th century, the Hephthalites overran the part of the Gupta Empire that was to their southeast and conquered central and north India. Emperor Bhanagupta of the Guptas defeated the Huns under Toramana in 510. Later the Hephthalites were defeated and driven out of India by the Indian kings Yasodharman and Narasimhagupta in the early 6th century. Christopher I. Beckworth, referring to Etienne de la Vaisière, says the Hephthalites should not be called White Huns. According to de la Vaisière, the name of the Hephthalites was not mentioned alongside that of the White Huns. In Chinese chronicles, the Hephthalites are called Janda or Ye-tai Lijua or Bikova, while older Chinese sources of c. 125 call them War or Hudun and describe them as a tribe living beyond the Great Wall in Dzungaria. Elsewhere they were called the Ectionites or White Huns, known to the Greeks as Ephthalite, Abdul or Abdul, to the Indians as Sveta Huna, or Turushka, to the Armenians as Hital, and to the Persians and Arabs as Haytal or Hayatilla, while their Bactrian name is Eta Beta Omicron Delta Alpha Lambda Omicron. According to most specialist scholars, the spoken language of the Hephthalites was an Eastern Iranian language, but different from the Bactrian language written in the Greek alphabet that was used as their official language, and minted on coins, as was done under the preceding Kushan Empire. Etymology. Although the Hephthalite Empire was known in China as Yada, Chinese chroniclers recognized this designated the leaders of the empire. The same sources document that the main tribe called themselves Hua. The modern Chinese variation Yanda has been given various Latinized renderings such as Yada, although the corresponding Cantonese and Korean pronunciations Yidat and Yeoptal are more compatible with the Greek Hephthalite. In Middle Persian sources Hephthalites are known as Hephdal, which according to Bailey is a variant as a North Iranian Saka term related to Khotanese Saka Hephthalite Saa, heroic. Historian Muhammad Balami derives the word Hephthalites from Bukharan with the meaning strong man, which seems similar to a Khotanese Saka word with the meaning brave, valiant. According to B.A. Lichtvansky, the names of the Hephthalite rulers used in the Shahnameh are Iranian. According to Xavier Tremblay, one of the Hephthalite rulers was named Kingila, which has the same root as the Sogdian word Exengama and the Waki word Shingar, meaning sword. The name Mihirakula is thought to be derived from Mithrakula, which is Iranian for the sun family, with Kula having the same root as Pashtu Kul, family. Toramana, Mihirakula's father, is also considered to have an Iranian origin. In Sanskrit, Mihirakula would mean the Kul family of Mihira, sun. Although Mihira is not purely Sanskrit but is a borrowing from Middle Iranian Mihr, Janos Harmata gives the translation Mithras begotten, and also supports the Iranian theory. Origins. There are several theories regarding the origins of the White Huns, with the Iranian and Turkic theories being the most prominent. For many years, scholars suggested that they were of Turkic stock. Some have claimed that some groups amongst the Hephthalites were Turkic speakers. According to the Encyclopedia of the Peoples of Asia and Oceania, the ancestry of the Hephthalites is still uncertain, but possibly Eastern Iranian within the larger Indo-European family for the majority. Some experts have also suggested the majority were of Turkic origins. They were certainly a mixed group who included peoples with many different origins, probably dominated by Eastern Iranian language, but their mixed ancestry also led to multilingualism. The Hephthalites inscribed their coins in the Bactrian script, held Iranian titles. The names of Hephthalite rulers given in Ferdowsi's Shahnameh are Iranian, based on gem inscriptions and other evidence. Manchen Helfin and V. Lifshitz conclude that the official language of the Hephthalite elite was East Iranian. In 1959, Kazuo Eneki proposed that the Hephthalites were probably Indo-European Iranians, as some sources indicated that they were originally from Bactria, which is known to have been inhabited by Indo-Iranian people in antiquity. Richard Fry is cautiously accepting of Eneki's hypothesis, while at the same time stressing that the Hephthalites were probably a mixed horde. More recently, Xavier Tremblay's detailed examination of surviving Hephthalite personal names has indicated that Eneki's hypothesis that they were East Iranian may well be correct, but the matter remains unresolved in academic circles. According to the Encyclopedia Iranica and Encyclopedia of Islam, the Hephthalites possibly originated in what is today Afghanistan and Pakistan. They apparently had no direct connection with the European Huns, but may have been causally related with their movement. It is noteworthy that the tribes in question deliberately called themselves Huns in order to frighten their enemies. Some white Huns may have been a prominent tribe or clan of the Chionites. According to Richard Nelson Fry, just as later nomadic empires were confederations of many peoples, we may tentatively propose that the ruling groups of these invaders were, or at least included, Turkic-speaking tribesmen from the east and north, although most probably the bulk of the people in the confederation of Chionites and then Hephthalites spoke an Iranian language. This was the last time in the history of Central Asia that Iranian-speaking nomads played any role. Hereafter all nomads would speak Turkic languages. Oxford historian Daniel T. Potts remarks that despite their Hephthalites are often regarded as Turkic, their personal names in coin legends are Iranian, emphasizing the French historian Étienne de la Vaisière cited in Xavier Tremblay, pour une histoire de la Serinda, 186. This does not mean that they were Iranian from the beginning, but only that the pace of assimilation for a tribe or a clan not at the height of the political hierarchy was swift. After 1 century in Bactria, the Hephthalites went Bactrian. Originally, the Hephthalites might have been Oghuric, and subterraneously came from the Altai. This view is seconded by F. Alvheim, who argued that the Hephthalite language was Turkic and the presence of Iranian words was connected with the penetrations from subordinated Iranian tribes. Vaisière, being more precisely, presumes Hephthalites were a Gaujo-Oghuric Turkic tribe. British Orientalist N. Sims Williams at least determines that, since we know from Chinese sources that the title Tegan was already used by the Hephthalites, it is tempting to regard this as evidence of the Altaic affinities of the Hephthalites. But in Bactrian, names which appear to derive from Tegan occur in texts which probably predate the Hephthalite period. According to the concise Encyclopedia of World History, the Ephthalites establishment in Samarkand could be seen as a marker for the start of the gradual Turkification of Transoxiana. Richard N. Fry, presuming that the Hephthalites were Iranian-speaking people, but being more specific, equates that the Hephthalites were originally tribes of Turkic or Altaic speech and came from the Mongolian Altai region via Central Asia to the Indian subcontinent by virtue of pressure from the Rurants. History. The 6th century Byzantine historian Procopius of Caesarea related them to the Huns in Europe. the Hephthalite Huns, who are called White Huns. The Hephthalite are of the stock of the Huns in fact as well as in name. However, they do not mingle with any of the Huns known to us, for they occupy a land neither adjoining nor even very near to them, but their territory lies immediately to the north of Persia. They are not nomads like the other Hunnic peoples, but for a long period have been established in a goodly land. They are the only ones among the Huns who have white bodies and countenances which are not ugly. It is also true that their manner of living is unlike that of their kinsmen, nor do they live a savage life as they do, but they are ruled by one king, and since they possess a lawful constitution, they observe right and justice in their dealings both with one another and with their neighbors, in no degree less than the Romans and the Persians. Scholars believe that the name Hun is used to denote very different nomadic confederations. Ancient Chinese chroniclers, as well as Procopius, wrote various theories about the origins of the people. They were descendants of the Yuezhi or Tocharian tribes who remained behind after the rest of the people fled the Xiongnu. They were descendants of the Kangju. They were a branch of the Taila, or they were a branch of the Uar. They were first mentioned by the Chinese, who described them as living in Dzungaria around 125. Chinese chronicles state that they were originally a tribe of the Yuezhi, living to the north of the Great Wall, and subject to the Ruran, as were some Turkic peoples at the time. Their original name was Hoa or Hoa Tun. Subsequently they named themselves Ye-tai Litu, after their royal family, which descended from one of the 5 Yuezhi families which also included the Kushan. They displaced the Scythians and conquered Sogdiana and Khorasan before 425. After that, they crossed the Syedaya River and invaded Persian lands. In Persia, they were initially held off by Bahramgar, but around 483–85, they succeeded in making Persia a tributary state by defeating the Sassanid forces at the Battle of Herat, where they killed the Sassanid king, Peroz I. After a series of wars in the period 503–513, they were driven out of Persia and completely defeated in 557 by Khosrau I. Their polity thereafter came under the Gokturks and subsequent Western Turkic Khaganate of the Turk Yafu of Tokaristan, with residence in Kunduz, and military forces in Gandhara, Kapasar and Zabulistan. These territories were later populated by additional Turkic tribes such as the Karluks and Kalach, as attested in Chinese, Persian and Arabic sources. The population of these lands consisted of Eastern Iranians, Persians, Turks, Indians, Dards and Kafirs, and the cultural tradition was equally represented by Bactrian, Persian, Hephthalite, Turkic and Indian elements. According to the 10th century geography book Hudud al-Alam, most Kalach settled down in the Ghazna region, of which many became assimilated to the local Pashto-speaking population and also likely formed the core of the Pashto-speaking Galzay tribe. Further Kalach conurbations existed in the Balkh, Tokarestan, Bos, and Guzgan regions. The Hephthalites also invaded the regions Afghanistan and present-day Pakistan, succeeding in extending their domain to the Punjab region. The Hephthalite was a vassal state to the Ruran Khaganate until the beginning of the 5th century. Between Hephthalites and Rurants were also close contacts, although they had different languages and cultures, and Hephthalites borrowed much of their political organization from Rurants. In particular, the title Khan, which according to McGovern was original to the Rurants, was borrowed by the Hephthalite rulers. The reason for the migration of the Hephthalites southeast was to avoid a pressure of the Rurants. Further, the Hephthalites defeated the Yuezhi in Bactria and their leader Akidara led the Yuezhi to the south. Procopius claims that the White Huns lived in a prosperous territory, and that they were the only Huns with fair complexions. According to him, they did not live as nomads, did acknowledge a single king, observed a well-regulated constitution, and behaved justly towards neighboring states. He also describes the burial of their nobles in tumuli, accompanied by their closest associates. This practice contrasts with evidence of cremation among the Chionites in Amanus and with remains found by excavators of the European Huns and remains in some deposits ascribed to the Chionites in Central Asia. Scholars believe that the Hephthalites constituted a second, Hunnish wave who entered Bactria early in the 5th century, and who seem to have driven the Kidarites into Gandhara. Newly discovered ancient writings found in Afghanistan reveal that the Middle Iranian Bactrian language written in Greek script was not brought there by the Hephthalites, but was already present from Kushan times as the traditional language of administration in this region. There is also evidence of the use of a Turkic language under the White Huns. The Bactrian documents also attest several Turkic royal titles, indicating an important influence of Turkic people on White Huns, although these could also be explained by later Turkic infiltration south of the Oxus. According to Simicats, they were Chionites who united under the Hephthalites as the vultures descended on the people, around 460 UAR. The UAR were one of the many ethnic components constituting the confederation known to the West as the Hephthalites and to the Chinese as Yandarin, the dominant ethnicity of Khwarezm. Peoples with similar names had been present along the Silk Road for centuries, and several Central European family names actually derive from the names of these tribes. Theophylactus Simicats uses the name Uar, sometimes written as War or Var. According to the Chinese classic Liangji Gongchu, the name Wa was an endonym used by the Hephthalites themselves, while was an exonym derived from their ruling dynasty and applied to them by outsiders. Origin and migration. Like Procopius, contemporary Chinese chroniclers had different theories about the origins of the Uar and the Hephthalites. That they were related in some way to the Indo-European Yuezhi. Based in Turpan and conquered by the Ruran, they were an important part of the early jade trade. That they were a branch of either the Kangju or Tila people, descending from the general Bahua, based in Turpan. They sided with the southern Xiongnu of Pingyang against the northern Xiongnu but were later conquered by the Ruran. Throughout the 5th century, it was the Uar who managed to succeed to the steppe heritage in a campaign which spread from the Tian Shan to the Carpathian Mountains. By around 460, the Uar had taken over much of central Eurasia from Xinjiang to the Volga River, and founded a capital at the city of Badiyan or Panjakent, near what is now Kujand. Though very little is known about the area from the late 5th to early 6th centuries. Hephthalites. According to the Book of Liang, the Yanda were an offshoot of the Yuezhi. It mentions an envoy sent in 516 by their Yandai Lachua, Hephthalite king, to the court at Nanjing. Chinese chronicles define Yanda as the name of a clan leading the Uar. In the Book of Wei they are supposed to be a variety of the Yuezhi, while the Uar, who are also described, are possibly an offshoot of the Tila. The Book of Wei indicates, however, that the Yanda do not share a similar language with the Ruran or the Tila. It is said that the Yanda language can be easily translated by the Tuyuhun, a group of people from the Kokon or Kazuo Eniki believed the Yanda to be an Iranian Satem language, in which case they cannot be related to the Indo-European Centum branch of Tocharians. Hanoi, the Kidarite dynasty which ruled the Ectionites, came from the Uar. As a result, the Ectionites have sometimes been called Uar Hanoi. Uar and Hanoi are the names associated with the two biggest tribes of Procopius's White Huns, commonly identified with the Sanskrit Sveta Huna but called Varkon or Varkunites by Menander Protector. Procopius writes that these White Huns are white-skinned and have an organized kingship. According to him, their life is not wild or nomadic, and they live in cities. Ivars Simicats mentions the Hanoi as the other major component under the Hephthalite ruling elite. These were identified as the true Avars of the East, and the political force behind what Simicats calls the pseudo-Avars, who eventually settled down in Pannonia. The Gokturks also considered the Khwarezmi and Uar as the true Avars and encouraged the Byzantines to regard the Avars, who had entered Europe, as pseudo-Avars. Around 630, Simakatz wrote that the European Avars were initially composed of two nations, the Uar and the Hano tribes. He wrote that the Basilt, Birnogas and the Sabirs were struck with horror, and honored the newcomers with brilliant gifts, when the Avars first arrived in their lands in 555. Religion. According to Song Yun, the Chinese Buddhist monk who visited the Hephthalite territory in 540 provides accurate accounts of the people, their clothing, the empresses and court procedures and traditions of the people, and he states the Hephthalites did not recognize the Buddhist religion and they preached pseudo-gods and killed animals for their meat. It is reported that some Hephthalites often destroyed Buddhist monasteries but were rebuilt by others. According to Shanzang, the third Chinese pilgrim who visited the same areas as Song Yun about 100 years later, the capital of Chahariyun had 5 monasteries. Interestingly, in the Hephthalite dominion Buddhism was predominant, but there was also a religious sediment of Zoroastrianism and Manichaeism. Bork had some 100 Buddhist monasteries and 30,000 monks. Outside the town was a large Buddhist monastery, later known as Norbaha. White Huns in southern Central Asia. In the northwest of the Indian subcontinent, the Hephthalites were not distinguished from their immediate Chianite predecessors and are known by the same name as Huna. Though Huna had already established themselves in Afghanistan and the modern province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa of Pakistan by the first half of the 5th century, and the Gupta Emperor Skandagupta had repelled a Huna invasion in 455 before the Hephthalite clan came along. The Hephthalites had their capital at Badian, modern Kunduz, but the emperor lived in the capital city for just 3 winter months, and for the rest of the year, the government seat would move from one locality to another like a camp. The Hephthalites continued the pressure on ancient India's northwest frontier and broke east by the end of the 5th century, hastening the disintegration of the Gupta Empire. They made their capital at the city of Sakala, modern Sialkot in Pakistan, under their emperor Mihirakula. But later the Huns were defeated and driven out of India by the Indian kings Yasodharman and Narasimhagupta in the 6th century.